What's up, y'all? A little faith, and welcome to episode number 6 of the Fagnostic Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Hayes, and if I'm still giving you episodes, it means that I am still looking for answers, and y'all, I got some answers today from Ani Zonneveld. Ani is the founder and president of Muslims for Progressive Values, an international human rights organization focusing on equality, LGBTQ rights, women's rights, social justice, and the freedom of expression and consciousness.
You go, girl.
Ani's work with the United Nations has led to her being a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, as well as being commissioned by the UN to create an anti-hate speech curriculum for Muslim communities. The first woman to release an English Islamic pop album in the US, she has continued to create content pushing the Islamic community and the world at large towards peace, progress, and inclusion. She's a TED Talk titled Islam, as American as Apple Pie, and is the subject of an award-winning documentary called Al-Imam that features her activism works. This was screened at the Cannes Film Festival in 2019.
I'd like to thank the Academy.
She truly does it all, and you're about to hear how her efforts are saving lives all across the globe. Here is Ani Zonneveld. Ani, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the show. I really appreciate you offering your time today. I already know that you've educated me in the past when you were on the radio show last year, and I'm excited to have you also educate my listeners because I think that your faith background is probably one of the most misunderstood and most uneducated in terms of people knowing about it and exploring about it. So I'm really excited to see how you educate us today with where you come from, who you are, and what you stand for. I ask this question to start every episode off with, and that is, are you a believer?
Yes, I am a believer. I believe in the creator of this universe.
Awesome. And just so we don't assume anything, can you identify your pronouns?
Yes, I'm Ani Zonneveld, and I go by she, her.
Awesome. Ani, can you just start us off with telling us where you come from? I know you're from Malaysia. You spent time in Germany and Egypt. You're the child of an ambassador or a diplomat, and how you got to where you are as being a voice, not just for your religion, but a voice for equality and progress.
I think a lot of that has to do with definitely my upbringing, the exposure at a very young age to the diversity of cultures, religion, languages, food, but most importantly from my parents. They really raised me in that egalitarian, open-minded mindset, and I've never heard them say anything negative or prejudice against anyone all my life, which is, I think, quite rare. And so as a result of that, my upbringing is very fruitful, very privileged in that regard. And I think I love my parents for that reason alone. And I can give you plenty of examples, but I'll give you one. And that is when I was young, about 5-6 years old, I was in Germany and I was going to the British school, which is a secular school. But every morning we would be gathered for the assembly, and at assembly we would pray the Lord's Prayer. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven, so that prayer. And so after a few mornings, I go back home and I said to my mom, I've been praying to Jesus. What do I do? And she's like, just replace Jesus with Allah and you're good. We're all praying to the same God. And so that until today has been intrinsic in how I see the world and how I see people and the belief system. And that, there's a lot of philosophy about religion, how we're all coming from the different streams and river and all, ending up in the ocean, right? So it's sort of that sort of worldview philosophy that I subscribe to. And I just so happen to be Muslim that also is such an interfaith religion. And it's unfortunate that Muslims themselves don't know that. And obviously when Muslims don't know that, non-Muslims also don't know that. So
Yeah, you spoke to that
Yeah,
a little
there's a
bit ago about how we've, with the mainstream religions, we have to fix what's going on inside our own congregations before we can really start addressing the problems of the world.
Yeah, well, the problem with religions is it has been created to be an exclusive club, and which is really unfortunate because that's not what the intention of the creator God is. And so it's all about power, it's all about
Yep.
money, it's all about controlling. And so religion throughout the centuries have been used to justify laws, to justify the control of your citizenship, and the way you think, how you dress, what you say, what you cannot say, the whole nine yards, right? And so that's the unfortunate thing about religion. It is a man-made construct, but
Yes.
the spirituality behind it isn't. And then I think that's where people need to really decipher between what is really the message of the creator and what is really the cultural and the patriarchal interpretation of God's message.
Yeah. Man, okay, so let's start at the beginning because I told you how I want to use this podcast as a way for you to assume that, and you're speaking to one of the dumbest people in the room, but assuming that we're all just completely unaware of what your faith means. Can you first give us the difference between Muslim and Islam, what those two words mean, and then also just the basic principles, the basic tenets of Islam?
Right. So Muslims are the practitioners of Islam, the religion. So Islam is the same as Christianity. Muslim is the same as Christians.
You just that's so simple. I've never known it.
That's
Thank
how,
you,
yeah,
Ani.
but it's two different words, so it can
Right.
get very confusing, right? And to be a Muslim is very simple. It's the proclamation with conviction in your heart that there is no God but God, and that Prophet Muhammad is his messenger. And that's it. And how you live your life is really basically being good to society, to the animals, to the environment, caring for humanity, regardless of what religion, race, creed this humanity is. And so it is actually at its heart a very universalist sort of value system, but that is not how it's being practiced, obviously. The five pillars of Islam is the declaration of your faith, which is Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah, which is what I said. There's no God but God, and that Prophet Muhammad is his messenger. The second one is prayers, 5 times a day. Now, if you're Sunni, it's 5. If you're Shia, it's 3. So it depends what denomination, to use a Christian term, you are. And the third one is fasting during the month of Ramadan. The fourth one is giving alms to charity. And the fifth one is going to Mecca for pilgrimage, if you can afford it, if you can physically are able to. That said, these are the traditional 5 pillars of Islam, okay? But these 5 pillars of Islam are not something that you can actually find in the Quran in a chapter.
So they were made by somebody or some group.
Exactly.
When was
Somebody
that?
decided, well, after Prophet Muhammad died, there was, the caliphs, those who took over the ruling of the early Muslim communities. And then they decided that, well, how do we guide our community to be identified as Muslim? What makes you Muslim? And so they picked out some of the themes out of the Quran, and they made it into the 5 pillars of Islam. And so, for example, the proclamation, there's no God but our God, that is in the Quran, but Muhammad is his last messenger. That's not the official proclamation in the Quran. So that was added. Fasting is a very constant theme in the Quran. Like, you do not know how good fasting is for you, so that's extrapolated. Also, the third is giving alms. There's a constant theme of giving to charity, taking care of the poor, taking care of the orphans. And how sinful if you were going to steal money from the orphans. If you're going to have a wife number two, you should be marrying someone who is a widow so that you can care for her and her children. So it's very children driven, but obviously that is not how it's being practiced.
Sure.
So there's all these extrapolation that the powers that be decided to make it into the 5 pillars of Islam. Now, if I was going to be that person to decide, I would have picked a whole slew of like 100 other themes in the Quran that I would have used as my pillar of Islam, right?
Sure, sure.
So the ones that I describe or that has been made into the concrete backbone of what identifies you as Muslims are very ritualistic practices. Yeah. So they're not values driven.
Right. But it also
which
just
is what MPV is.
The gist, and I want to talk about MVP as well, or MPV as well, because that's a huge part of your life and also is doing a lot to fix the disconnects in interfaith efforts. But with those 5 pillars, I'm almost seeing like a progression from faith down to Mecca, from loving God to loving self to loving others. Like the declaration of faith is your commitment to the divine, to God. And then you get into the prayer, which is obviously self-care, and then into the fasting, which is more self-care, and then to the giving. It's like the airplane method of you put your own mask on first before you can help others. That's really interesting. And that speaks to the universalist idea that you just talked about as well. So tell me about Muhammad, because I know that he is the last messenger of Islam, but I didn't know that there were other messengers before him or other prophets. And also, I don't know, and forgive my ignorance, but I guess if I didn't have my ignorance, we wouldn't have a podcast. But when was Muhammad alive? Where did they live? Tell me. Yeah.
So Prophet Muhammad was alive during 622 AD. And it's interesting. He didn't become a prophet until he was 42 years old. And so very late in life.
So you're saying that I still have a chance to become a prophet?
Yes.
Fantastic.
We are all prophets in our own good way.
Yes, we are. I like that.
So the Quran is basically Abrahamic tradition 3.0, you could say. So you have the Abrahamic tradition of the Judaism, and then you have Christianity with Jesus, and then you have with Muhammad. So all, the prophets that are in the Judeo-Christian Bible is also in the Quran. The deviation would be the addition of Prophet Muhammad, because it was through him that the Quran was revealed, but it was revealed through the angel Gabriel, which is also in the Bible and in the Jewish tradition.
I didn't know that Gabriel made other appearances.
Yes, it's
gosh.
Gabriel character. Yes.
Where's Gabriel's religion? I feel like there's like a common denominator here with good old Gabe.
Yes, he is a unifier. He is the interfaith element, right? So basically, there are a lot of summers. So we have a chapter on Mary, and the delivery of Mary, Jesus by Mary. And so the stories are similar to Christianity, but it's actually more detailed.
Wait, so Jesus is in the Quran?
Yes, many times. Actually, Jesus is mentioned more times in the Quran than Muhammad is. Yeah.
I wish y'all could see my face. My mouth is on the floor. I had no idea.
Yeah, he's a very prominent prophet in Islam.
Wow.
So so that's the thing. So it's crazy. This conflict, is crazy. But the conflict is created by human beings intentionally, right? Because we have, for whatever reason, we can only hate there's got to be an other to hate for us to be stronger. And that is so counterintuitive and so counter to spirituality.
Yes, it is.
It isn't about the hate. It's about the love. And it's all about how do we all love and lift everybody up together. That is what it's supposed to be about. But that's not what religions have become.
Right.
So I think, Prophet Muhammad was basically an orphaned. He was orphaned at a young age. He was in a semi-powerful tribe, part of a semi-powerful tribe, but he had a very good reputation for being an honest person. So his nickname was the honest character. Here's the dude who's honest. And so he became a prophet late in life because he was so frustrated with his society, the slavery, the misogynistic, the intense classism and tribalism of his society at that time in Saudi Arabia, which still is very tribal in many parts of the Arab world. And so he decided to just go off in a cave in a mountain, which is one of the practices of the pilgrimage when you go to Mecca. And he meditates for 40 days. And during the last few days of his meditation is when Angel Gabriel comes and speaks to him and reveals the first passage from the Quran, what is now the Quran. And he freaks out and he thinks he's going mad and he's about to just jump off the cliff. But he struggles down and he's, all shaken and just all shook up. And, his wife, Khadija, embraces him and says, and she's Christian, by the way. And she says to him, no, you are not crazy. You are being touched by the word of God. And you just need to face it and live it. You need to do what is your responsibility. Obviously, you've been chosen. And so during the old Christian, this is what, this is some of the, well, I don't know how official the theology it is, but the old Christians did believe there was going to be another prophet. And so this is Khadija, of her heritage, speaking from her knowledge. And what's really interesting about Prophet Muhammad and Khadija is this. So this is the contradiction between the real Islam 1400 years ago and the bastardization of Islam in the 21st century. Prophet Muhammad was much younger than Khadija. So Prophet Muhammad ended up working for Khadija, who was a very, very wealthy trader. And, so she was this very wealthy woman, and she loved Prophet Muhammad's honesty and integrity. And she was also older than him. By 23 years old, she proposed to him.
Come on, modern female. Yes.
Exactly, right? And here we are in Saudi Arabia and much of the Muslim world. This is this appalling thing that it's the reverse. You have the 63-year-old marrying a 16 or a 14, right? It's just appalling. And then, the woman who is so liberated and so, powerful. And here you have in Saudi Arabia until recently that women couldn't even drive.
Right.
So this is the twisted bastardization of the interpretation of Islam. And unfortunately, the Muslim world defines Islam by what Saudi Arabia does and doesn't do, which is utterly the wrong way to look at Islam and the Muslim world.
When you say that, do you mean by those practicing the religion in Saudi Arabia, or do you mean by the actual governing bodies of Saudi Arabia?
Well, they define how you practice Islam, and so therefore, how Saudi Arabia practices Islam does not define what the real Islam is. Number one, and number two, they dictate what Islam is and how you dress, etc. But right. It's not just Saudi Arabia. The majority of Muslim countries that are governed by Muslim majority governments all have a definition of what their Islam is. Mm-hmm. And so there is no uniform one Islam, because otherwise we would all be dressed the same, talk the same, pray the same way, meet the same time. It would be very uniform, but that is not the case.
So knowing now that the Christian's Christ is referenced several times and revered in the Quran, do you think some of the bastardization of Islam has come from Christianity in either being upset that their deity is referenced and upheld in a different religion? And so, because the religious warfare, that's what I'm trying to figure out is where who started it? Where it started? Because I know that it's profitable. I know that it's beneficial to leaders to create the divide. But
It started with the Crusaders.
yeah. I could see you.
So
Y'all can't see this, but I could see you waiting for me to finish my question just because you already had the answer. Yeah, no, you're so right. And do you
so
know how
let
many
me tell.
Christians don't know about the Crusades?
They don't.
No, people do not know. I mean, like some do, yes. But
Yeah.
I think it's also because churches know what a problematic situation that presents. And so we can't talk about it because it's going to make you question. And if you question, then you might not give your 10%. And if you don't give your 10%, I don't get my salary.
That's true. It's all about the money.
Yes, it is. Well, and that's what I look at,
Okay.
what's happening overseas. And, the three major religions are battling over this area of land. And of course, it's about money and real estate and power and oil and whatever. But my other thought goes to, it's also about these insecure beings just wanting to claim control over the true word, the true God.
So let me go back to Prophet Muhammad. So
Okay.
this is the kind of character, and it relates to the question that you just asked me. So um, at the inception of Islam, the tribes of the powerful tribes of the day wanted to kill him. They had so many assassination attempts on him unsuccessfully. And the first converts to Islam were asked to go into hiding, and so he sent the early converts to a Christian territory ruled by a Christian king, which is supposedly now in Ethiopia, and to give protection. And actually, there was a movie that actually depicts this particular moment when the pagans chased the Muslim to this Christian land, and how they were telling this Christian king, "You have to kill them," etc. And this Christian king asked the Muslims, "Now recite something from the Quran that so that I can believe that you are really a believer of God." And so they recited a passage from the chapter on Mary. And the king broke down in tears. And that's when the king decided to give these Muslim converts protection. And ever since then, Prophet Muhammad has a covenant which has been authenticated as a real document, which is now actually in this what do you call it? Okay, let me get back to that. But anyway, the covenant is between Prophet Muhammad and the Christians. And it says basically, until the end of time, Muslims' responsibility is to protect all Christian places of worship and all Christians until the end of time. Okay? And he has signature with his handprint. And this document is it's in Egypt, where you have the Orthodox Christians, and it's up in the mountains. I'm sorry, the name escapes me, but it is there. And so it's a covenant that Prophet Muhammad has with Christians until this day.
Okay.
But obviously, that's not how Muslims have been treating Christians, right? So I can talk about the Crusaders till I'm blue in the face, but I think that's like your responsibility for Christians to figure that one out. But it's my responsibility to tell you that this is what was Prophet Muhammad did, and this is how, and unfortunately that is not how Muslims have lived up to their responsibility. That's number one. Number two, when he moved to a new place called Medina, he created he was asked to govern the state. And so he basically created the first constitution, which is a secular constitution, much the way the United States is configured with a federation. So you had all these different tribes and their particular religious laws. So you had several Jewish laws and Jewish tribes, and you had the Muslim, and you had the pagans, and you had the Christian tribes. And he governed all these tribes as a federation, and an agreement that you govern your particular community based on your tradition and your religious laws. That is secular. That is the definition of secularism. So this is called the Medina Constitution. And you know what, Matt? The thing about it is that all these things that I'm sharing with you about Prophet Muhammad's covenant with the Christians, the Medina Constitution, these are not taught to Muslims as children. I learned about this so late in life. See, so we're taught the 5 pillars of Islam and this rigidity of orthodoxy and dogma and the ritualistic practice, but we're not taught all this beautiful stuff that makes Islam beautiful. That's the problem with the Muslim world.
Well, it's also the problem with the Christian world. I mean, I could say the same about growing up. You're just taught, yeah, God loves you, but only if you abide by this, only if you don't do this, because if you do, you go to hell and you don't want to go there. I mean,
Levy.
yeah.
Yep, that's right.
Um, I am so with the Christian king promising to the end of time to protect, or I'm sorry, for the Muslims to protect the Christians. Was there ever, I mean, I know that they were feeling like they were given a leg up by this king, but like, where's the reciprocation? Why did the Christian king not say, you're saying you have my back, I'll have yours to the end of time too?
Yeah, well, that's not for me to say. It's a king who centuries ago, I think he provided the shelter for these Muslims who were definitely under siege, and I think he felt that that was the least he could do
Sure.
as a believer, right?
Yeah.
That's a humane thing to do, is to protect your fellow human beings.
That's what sounds
right?
like a true believer in the very essence of the word.
Exactly.
But I look at,
and you do it not to negotiate. You do it for the love of God and for the love of humanity, right?
Exactly. And I look at our current state of wars, which all are pretty much based on religious warfare, or at least using that to justify the warfare. And I just am like, how can we have forgotten that message of taking care of one another? And it's just, our leaders use this so much to their gain, and it's such a crime against humanity, against God.
And what's really appalling is that religion is being used to demonize each other.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at the Israel-Palestine conflict, you look at just about every conflict out there. There's so much of the infiltration of the use of religion in ramping up one against the other. Same in Africa in some of these communities. There is such a conflict and a battle of ideology of how many converts can you bring into Christianity, and so the Muslims now feel that in some of the African states that the Christians from the West in America primarily are going in, funding these really these Christian institutions and organizations and churches in Africa with the sole purpose of basically conversion, and also laying some of the most homophobic and misogynistic, interpretation of Christianity, unfortunately, which has become such a powerful it's a real powerful, and unfortunately has taken Africa down this religious, religious war track, which is so unnecessary. Because traditionally in Africa, for example, and I know a bit about Africa because I've been working there for 5 years in 3 different countries, four different countries now, and is that they're very much more of a free spirited, and so you have families that have Muslims and Christians and animists, and they go and pray to the closest church the next day, and on a Friday they go to the closest mosque. These are like the same individuals, so they have a much more openness about God, the creator, rather than the religion. And
also appreciating that different people may have a path to God that's different than their own, and that's okay.
Yeah. And they have families, like I said, they're very mixed families. And so intermarrying in different faiths is also, not a shock to the system, but all of that is really dying out because of the ramping up of proselytization by the Christians and the Muslims being defensive, and the radicalization of the Muslims by the Saudis and by the Gulf states. So it's becoming so ugly unnecessarily, and that's really unfortunate.
Yeah, it is. And you were saying that the radicalization is coming, from different sects within that faith, but it also is coming from the faith that I grew up with. I mean, we've got to, of course, fix our own stuff in our own communities, but it's also like we have to be aware of what we're causing in the other communities, right?
Yes, exactly. Yes, you really do.
So obviously, you've spoken a lot just now on what has fueled your efforts with Muslims for Progressive Values, but it sounds actually like the organization should be called Muslims for the Original Values, because it seems,
you're not the only one that has said that to me. And I'm like, you know who said this to me? My rabbi friend. I have a very dear rabbi friend. Ani, why didn't you call it Muslims for Traditional Values?
Yes.
Then you would really have riled up. It's like, yeah, I know. Thanks. It's a bit too late.
Which rabbi is that?
His name is Rabbi Kaufman.
Okay, because I had Rabbi Denise Eger on a couple episodes ago. She's
a dear friend.
Oh my gosh.
She's a dear friend too.
Well, and you and her, and then Reverend Denise Barnes, I kind of view as like the holy trifecta, because, because I much prefer a feminine voice in religion, but it just seems like the three of you together is like the perfection of like my path to the divine. Like I love your voices individually and also combined. But that's what I'm hearing, is that the original values are actually the ones that I would jump on board with today.
Yeah. And that's not what, our respective religions would want to teach. I mean, I think maybe in theory, but not in practice. Right.
So tell us about this organization, Muslims for Progressive Values, and what they do, what the goal is, and also what backlash you've faced from the Muslims for the current values.
Right. So very nicely said, Matt. So Muslims for Progressive Values is a human rights organization, and it came about just simply after 9/11. And I wanted, like I said, I was raised in a very inclusive and egalitarian environment. And so there was none of this misogynistic interpretation or homophobic, sort of environment, and that's not what you have at the mosque. And so I really wanted to create a space for me, because I don't have family in the United States. I'm the only one here, and so I wanted to create a community of like-minded Muslims, where you can think and express freely, and where everyone is treated equally and with respect and dignity. And it's not much to ask, right? But you will not get that at the mosque. So,
right.
So, after really relearning Islam for myself after 9/11, I said, holy cow, this Quran is so liberating compared to how the actual practice is. And so I started a community here in LA, not realizing that there were a lot of other Muslims that felt the same way, and the values really resonated. And so that became a national organization, and we did a lot of with arts and music, and just the critical thinking aspect, and social media helped, obviously, and that just spread from one country to another. So now we're in like 17 countries.
Wow.
Yeah, and not in name, but in philosophy, right?
Sure,
so
sure.
So for me, I don't care. You can take whatever name, I don't care, but just adhere to human rights norms and the spirituality of universal values. So
are you seeing victories in areas where the current values are seemingly winning the war, like where you're able to get your message out and see like, oh, okay, we're moving the needle a little more forward towards the light?
Yeah, totally.
Good.
it's been 15 years now at Muslims for Progressive Values, and so our current mission is inculcating a culture of human rights, a culture of human rights in Muslim societies. And I say this, and this is not just, special for Muslims, but even here in the United States. I mean, we elect leaders who represent our values, and that's why we had Trump, for example, and we have some of the misogynistic and homophobic members of representatives in some of the states and in our federal House and Senate, because there are people that these people are elected based on the constituencies who have these set of values. And so this is going, and laws get changed. So the most important thing is, and the most difficult thing is, how do you create a culture rooted in human rights and societies? Because at the end of the day, that is what's going to legislate, that is what's going to really and to really once and for all constitute or provide us with a constitution that is also very egalitarian and human rights rooted. And so that's an American example, because I'm assuming your audience is American and that you can relate to that. But if you take that to any democratic society, that is also going to be the same model. And so what we've started to do is to work in many of these communities and work with religious leaders who are also egalitarian and human rights rooted in their interpretation of Islam. And their commitment is to actually preach every week on human rights, on women's rights, and the importance of and interpreting the Quran and Islam in this universal human rights framing, but using Islamic language.
Sure.
And so what we've called it, we've termed it Islamic human rights language. Now it's really resonating because I also do a lot of work at the UN. I also counsel, provide advice to the EU on policy matters, and at the United Nations, obviously, I'm the progressive Muslim organization, and so we're always countering and challenging the human rights abuses in the name of religion. So, for example, when you have a Muslim country justifying its human rights abuses, whether it be child marriage, whether it be LGBT rights, whether it be apostasy and blasphemy laws, they always use Islam to justify. They say, oh, it is our religion. And for decades, nobody at the UN would touch it. They would just be disgusted by it, but nobody would touch it because they don't dare touch the religion. And so when we came onto the picture, we will say, to hell with that. We're coming at it with religion. You use your culture, religious and Sharia law. Well, we've got a stronger position when we're quoting from the Quran to justify every human being has the right to believe or not to believe, to leave Islam or not, how they want to believe. And here's the words in the Quran which you believe to be the word of God. So you're going to argue with me on that, So it's incredible.
Ani, they must hate you. The Orthodox must hate you.
Yeah, well, they don't know what to do with me. Yes.
Oh my! But so what kind of backlash have you faced from that?
I think for a while in the beginning, particularly even here in the United States, there was a good number of threats and efforts to undermine us. But I think because we were using the language of religion and the Quran to justify our position, so because we did that, that is why we're still standing. If I was going to use secular terms, then we're not. Then that's a whole different organization, because that's everybody else basically. Right. So, but because we're purposefully using the language that is compassionating and loving and egalitarian and human rights rooted, then it's hard for these traditional Muslims to really argue with us. from where we're coming at. And when we submitted our application to the United Nations for our what we call our ECOSOC status, which is quite an exclusive club, and I was really afraid that the Muslim countries on this committee that approve or disapprove your membership would definitely vote to disallow us into this ECOSOC status because we support LGBT rights.
Spell that word, ECOSOC. I've never heard that word before.
ECOSOC. It's ECOSOC, ACOSOC. It's an acronym, and it stands for Economic I don't know. It's one of these UN.
No, I'll go down the rabbit hole with that one. Thank you.
So I was worried about that because we obviously see women leading prayer. We support everyone, everyone's equal spirituality. That means LGBT people can also and should also lead prayer. Trans people can pray in our space, and wherever they feel comfortable with their identity, or because if you go to the mosque, it's binary, it's man, woman, right? There's no in between. So, so all this stuff. So, but I was really surprised that they approved us. And one diplomat said to me, and I will not say which country, he said to me, well, it's interesting what you're doing. I don't agree with everything what you're saying, but you are definitely giving Islam a good image.
And that has to matter. Optics matter. They have to appreciate at least that, right?
Yeah. And, I'm thinking to myself, well, why the hell don't you guys practice this in your own bloody country then?
Well, I think we know, and it's because it relinquishes power. I mean, they have to hold on to it.
Exactly.
God. Well, can you tell my listeners, because I want this to be, a really personal testimony to what you experienced, but because MPV came out of your experience after 9/11, what was it like to be a Muslim in America after that, when even the most progressive and liberal of news outlets were pinning all this trauma on your religion and the people who practiced it?
Yeah, and it was very difficult to go through it. And I remember when that happened, my first gut instinct was, oh God, let it not be a Muslim doing this, right? But it happened to be so. But it's really interesting because when you go into the Muslim majority countries and you talk about 9/11, they are very visceral. They said these people that did 9/11, they're not Muslims. Okay, period. Don't talk to me about Islam and Muslim doing this and that and the other. Whereas American Muslims pussyfoot around this issue. So it's very interesting. But Bush, bless his heart, actually did a real service for the American Muslim community. He went to a mosque and he stood there with the imams, religious leaders, and said, American Muslims are not our enemies. And he really went out of his way to define who the enemy is.
I remember that.
And but that was also a moment when we all looked at all these religious leaders like, who the hell are these people? We didn't elect them to represent us, because they're so orthodox. And that's also one of the reasons why we need to organize and we need to be represent American Muslims to represent our values, because our values are very different from those orthodox. It's like Orthodox Judaism, or it's like the Catholics, right? It's very different than the Catholics are very different from the Episcopalian, and Orthodox Judaism very different than the Reform or the Constructionists. So, that's, if I'm going to describe it that way, I think that helps your listeners. But things were actually better then for American Muslims than they are now, because what has transpired between the first 2-3 years after 9/11 to now is that there has been a really concerted effort by certain segment of the American population, including some of the Christians and some of the rich Jewish funders, to create content to demonize Muslims and all Muslims in America. And I mean, you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars poured into this campaign against Islam and Muslims. And if you go to some of the bookstores and some of the airports in the South, you will see some really Islamophobic books like people actually are paid to do this campaign against your fellow Americans. And it's really
And it's also not shocking that they are choosing to, especially like focus those book sales in airports where Americans have been taught to be scared of Muslims in that context.
that's
You
interesting. I
know?
never thought about it that way. But the thing is, so my last name is Zonneveld, right? And
Mhm.
so I get on some mailing lists from the anti-Muslim camps because they think I'm Jewish. And it's very interesting for me to read all the stuff that they're doing, their campaign, and all that they are, and how they spread this really demonization of Muslims and Islam. And there was a time when I would see things being shared and reshared by professors at universities. So it's not just these uneducated, ignorant, no, it's not. It's actually the intellectuals themselves, and that's the problem that
Yeah.
we have to fight.
Can you elaborate more on your UN work? I feel very privileged to speak to someone who gets to talk to the UN. That's so fancy. How did you get involved? And how did they find you? Did you seek them out?
Well, the entry point was when somebody said to me, Ani, you need to be in the UN spaces and you need to challenge these Muslim majority countries when they justify all their human rights abuses in the name of quote unquote Sharia law, quote unquote God's law. Sharia law is not God's law. Sharia law is 100% man-made set of law. But most Muslims don't know that because we've been lied to.
Yep.
And so when I'm at the United Nations, so all these countries get reviewed periodically and it's all calendared. And so we will look at the human rights abuses and we actually file them into the UN system. And then there's a committee at the UN that reviews it. And the UN committee then would actually read our report and then also challenge the representative of the country. Well, you justify apostasy law in the name of Sharia law. And so we have an ally who is a human rights and also a scholar of Islam in one of these committees. And he actually challenged Pakistan on this. And he says, well, where does it say this in the Quran? And he's a scholar of Islam. So he knew what he was talking about. He has his lineage on scholarship of Islam is historical. As a matter of fact, I use the book that his great grandfather wrote on human rights in Islam to to bolster our position.
You
So
said his great grandfather wrote a book?
yes,
And what year?
yes,
That would have been what, 1800s?
yeah, something like that, yeah,
So
or
he was so
early.
in the 1800s, he was speaking on human rights.
Yeah, his great grandfather was. So I have the English translation of the book, and so I've
Oh
been
my
using
God.
that. Yeah, yeah. So you have to use the scholarship to bolster your position because look, I don't wear a headscarf. My last name is Zonneveld. I'm an American, even though I was born in Malaysia, and so I do not represent what is quote unquote Muslim traditional, right? Like if you saw me walking the street, you would not know I'm a Muslim, period. And you see how I'm dressed right now.
Right.
So, um, and so it's really important for me and when I speak to really have the scholarship, not new, but old traditional scholarship, good old traditional scholarship to back up our position. And that is why it's very challenging for these member states to come back to us. And as a matter of fact, they've had to re-review their policy in regards to human, justification on Sharia law justifications. So, but it helps to have an ally in the system
Of
also,
course. Of
for us to
course.
play tag that way. Yeah.
It's interesting you're so adamant about relying on the original text in order to justify your quote unquote progressive values, which we've already decided are just the original values. But I look at Christianity and
I
and
love you, Matt.
but Christianity, they claim to base their values on the Bible, but it's the current Bible and it's not the original text because they've had to translate it into ways that manipulate their own small-minded viewpoints. But if you look at the original text of the Bible, whether it be in Greek or Hebrew, it doesn't speak a lot of the hatred that the current Bible supports, like especially with homosexuality. And I want to get into that now because you truly, with this podcast being queer centric, you are not queer, but you are a massive queer ally because of your voice in your faith. So what work do you do for the LGBTQIA plus community?
I have often been mistaken to be a lesbian because I'm such a big, big supporter of LGBTQI rights. It's so funny. It's appalling. I mean, LGBTQ people are human beings, and so if I'm going to be talking about human rights, I can't pick and choose my human rights. I need to be completely inclusive and intersectional in the work that I do. And I've been doing intersectional work from the start for 15 years. And that's a new sort of shift that's happening now, but it hasn't been. And people really didn't understand, why do you have to talk about LGBT in a women feminist setting? Well, not all feminists are straight women. They're also lesbians. Hello, and child marriage in the United States, they're not all just straight girls. A lot of them are forced into marriage because they're discovered, to be lesbian or figuring it out what their sexuality is. So it's not that simple, people, because we're not simple human beings. And so what I've done over the years is I've produced, cultivated, partnered with scholars of Islam in creating content in Islamic theology that is affirming of LGBTQI rights, because there's a lot of trauma with LGBT Muslims, as you can just imagine, being ingrained from such a young age with homophobic theology and the self-hate, and it's really sad for me to see that, and particularly the evidence of the trauma of homosexual Muslims is evident in, for example, in what happened with a pulse shooting in Florida. The guy was homosexual, but he was married. He was trying to be straight, but he was gay. And he was so full of self-hatred that he decided to go down and bring, 49 other people with him, right?
Who were living their truth openly. Yeah.
Exactly.
Adi, just because I don't want to lose this thought, how is there, because in bringing up these young queer people in the Muslim faith and teaching them to not be that way, is there a hell in Islam? Is there what's the punishment for disobeying what you're taught is God's will for your life?
Well, that's the thing. There's nothing. Prophet Muhammad never punished anyone for being homosexual. His wife had homosexual friends. In the Quran, there is mentioned of the word men who do not desire women. Mm-hmm. Okay. So if the Quran mentions that in a passing way, not in a derogatory way,
not condemnation,
not in a condemned, why the hell are we condemning LGBT people? Right? And throughout centuries in the Muslim society, we've had prominent homosexuals, scholars, artists, rulers, poets, you name it, right? Members of the society. And so when I get challenged at the United Nations, this is very important, by very conservative Muslim countries, diplomats, that kind of, oh, you're just an American tool, promoting LGBT and marriage equality and all that. And I just turn around, hello, excuse me. It's like, were there any discriminatory laws against homosexuality before colonization? And of course, the answer is they're taken aback and yeah. I'm like, exactly. If anything, you're the one that is perpetuating this puritanical Christianity. You, not me, not this me who is promoting this Western agenda. So get your picture right. You're the one that's doing it. And so so we've developed evidence for that. We've had panel discussions at the UN, bringing LGBT people, talking about third spirit, the culture of inclusivity prior to colonization. It is really powerful.
Yeah, it is. And with that work, because I know you have a TED Talk that I think it's called something Islam, as American as apple pie.
Islam as American as American as apple pie.
Tell me about that.
Well, I basically compare and connect the American philosophy of justice for all with Islam and at its roots. So
which you've already sold me on. I mean, just based on the tenets you talked about earlier.
Yep. Look, you talk to whenever an imam is interviewed in the United States, what do they say? Oh, Islam is a religion of peace. And I'm like, what the hell? If Islam is a religion of peace, why is there such mayhem in the Muslim world? Seriously, right? There's a disconnect. Either that Islam is a religion of peace and you're teaching it wrong, or that Islam really isn't a religion of peace. And so what I did in my TED talk was basically to connect that Islam is rooted in justice, and because you cannot have peace without justice,
Right.
and the justice for all, which is this American philosophy, which we still have to live up to, by the way.
Yeah, no, you're right. And then what about the documentary that you worked on as well that played at the Cannes Film Festival?
Yeah, the documentary is called Al Imam, and it wasn't something I worked on. I was the subject, and this guy from Kuwait came and wanted to do a documentary about my work as a female imam and all the values that I advocate for. And it's done really well. It's 5 years, and it's still making the circuits. At, the film festivals. It's just crazy. This film keeps going and going and going. And then in 2019, it was filmed at the Cannes Film Festival, which is crazy, So,
Yeah. I
yeah.
mean, that's the penultimate. Wow, God. Um, so rather than try to work your religion towards the light, why did you choose that path versus just leaving the religion and maybe having your own interpretation of the divine? Like, what made you want to stay a part of Islam?
Yeah. So when I restudied Islam after 9/11, there's something that we say in Arabic. It's called niyat. Niyat is your intention, which is actually a word that's becoming, being used a lot in the spiritual realm. And so what you intend on doing really plays a role in how the universe opens up to you. So before I started going on this journey of relearning, I said to myself, now, if I read this and study and go through this journey, if I end up leaving Islam, so be it. If I come closer to Islam as a result of it, then so be it. And what I found was that I fell in love with Islam, with the Quran, Islam. And there was a fire that lit, which still is going really strong until today, which I cannot extinguish, because when I've asked God to please, dim it for me so that I can be normal.
Right.
It just, the next day I wake up and it's even like doubled down, really cranked up even. So I stop asking for it to be dimmed down. So yeah, I don't know. I can't explain it. It's the explanation. I can't explain it. All I can say is that it's just really this fire from the belly that just drives me and drives me. I'm always like so driven and so ambitious. We have an international umbrella organization now. We are very prominent on the international arena. I mean, I can go on, and we are reforming the religious court in Kenya to make it more women's rights compliant. We have developed children's curriculum rooted in human rights in Burundi that I'm hoping can be duplicated in other African countries. I've co-authored a children's curriculum rooted in human rights for Muslims in the West. Yeah, I've done music, because we cannot be really part of the American fabric until culturally, musically, we created something here from home, America. And so I've created several catalog of songs that are spiritual, that is the lyrics from the Quran, from Rumi, from other famous Muslim poets and saints in English, and set to classical music and layered vocally like a choir, so
And
I don't know if you can imagine.
you've received some accolades for these musical attempts, haven't you?
Yes, I have. Yes, I've received a Grammy certification for a music project that I worked on, a contemporary blues project with Kebmo.
It's
But
I love that we don't lead with that. Like, don't bury the lead, Ani. Let's that would be on my t-shirt if I had that accolade. Um, gosh, with your interfaith efforts, uh, well, I actually with these efforts in Africa, because it's such a male-dominated environment in how they practice the religion there. I would imagine that in order to get your message out there, it's pivotal that you're reaching the women. But how hard is it to reach the wives of these Orthodox practitioners? How hard is it to get the women to then stand up to their Orthodox partners to move this forward?
so, yes, the male dominate there. It's a patriarchal society. I work with these imams, these egalitarian-minded imams, and they are at the forefront of it. We are in like 58 mosques in Burundi now. And so when I was in Burundi, I've been there twice already. And one time I was at a mosque and the imam had called together about 80 of the mothers that are part of his, congregation. And they're all sitting on the floor, and we're talking about child marriage and how illegal it is in Islam, and it's also unjust, etc. And so I said to the mothers, like, look, if you marry your child off at a young age, she will not be educated. And yeah, sure, you're going to get the dowry, which you're not supposed to, by the way. It's supposed to go to her. So that's, forbidden you broke the law, number one, besides forcing her into marriage. But you only get what, 200 euros? Now imagine if your daughter was educated. She's going to hopefully get a good job, and she'll be able to provide for you until the day you die. So what's better? And they all smile, right? Because even in the human rights work, Matt, self-interest
I was going to
is very
say, you're
important.
appealing to almost the dark side of humanity. You're appealing to
Yes.
the ego. You're appealing to the greed, which is smart because I mean that's where it hits home the most.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that worked.
Ooh, you're so sneaky, Ani.
And the imam has been using our network of imams have been using that, as an enticement in addition to Islam says this, Islam says that. But yeah,
God,
so we
you are
use
saving
that.
so many young girls. I mean, there's no way to quantify the amount of young females you've probably saved from either a life of sentence to marriage or even death or mutilation or suicide. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm so thankful for your work in your community.
Well, and the thing about it too is that, and then we also have a program called Clubs for She, where we actually have an overnight camp for young women, and here we teach them critical thinking, and we really teach them about the Islamic human rights language, because when they leave the camp, for them to really flourish, they need to have the tools to argue back against their father, their brother,
Oh
or their
God.
society, right? So that's one thing, but equally important is that these young women have the imams as their to back them up, and so you can't educate this crop of potential what we call the multipliers, right? The multiplying effect, because they're going to have children, they're part of society, and so and they're teachers, mothers are teachers. And so you have to have their safety also at the forefront. And the imams provide that safety as well. So we work it from top down. We have a radio show in Burundi that reaches 5.9 million people. So
Wow.
we've really reached a large constituency. So now, after 5 years, whenever there is like a Ramadan, end of Ramadan, there's a big festivity. It's called Eid, and it's our equivalent of Christmas. And these Muslims will not go to the closest mosque if it's read by a radical imam. They will go much further distance to an imam that is part of our network, right? So,
Wow, that is so encouraging to hear.
yeah.
How is that effort funded? I mean, is it all just donation based? Is it UN funded? I mean,
Yeah. No, no, UN doesn't fund anything. Yeah, it's donor based. Yeah, and I have a very generous foundation that gives us 50,000 to operate in 3 countries for 1 year, which is
That
no
doesn't sound
money.
like a lot of money. Yeah, I was going to say that doesn't sound like a lot of money at all.
But we are very resourceful,
Sure.
and so yeah.
Well, how can my
But
listeners
yeah.
explore how to? Because I would assume that like any amount is appreciated, and the more little amounts obviously add up. How can people go and support these efforts for you? Because it's
You can,
not just your religious efforts. This is humanitarian efforts.
yes, it is. And what's really important too is that the non-Muslims actually look at us and say, yeah, okay, you are our you are not a threat to us. You are our real true sisters and brothers of humanity. And so because we have shared values.
Hmm.
And what's really important is in our curriculum and our worldview, even in Africa and obviously in the West, is that we don't look at Islam as being superior to other religions. We look at all religions as being equal,
Hmm.
and that's what makes us different. Like I officiate a lot of mixed faith couple weddings, which something I started in 2006, and now it's like we're the only organization that do these interfaith marriages and also same-sex marriages with no conversions involved. And so a lot of people are into marrying. That's America.
Right.
So we've been at the forefront of that. So this is part of the cultural change that MPV that I've been you know um, at I would say the quarterback for,
Right.
for these activities. So to donate, yes, go to our website, mpvusa.org, which stands for Muslims for Progressive Values. And there's a donate button, and then you can just give however much you want, and it would be really greatly appreciated.
Sure. Are there non-monetary efforts like where people or get together on a Saturday and put together packets and boxes or something like that?
For non-monetary, it's best that you email us, and it'll come to me at info@mpvusa.org. And depending on what your skill set is, I could definitely utilize like social media sharing or what have you. So we can figure that one out, or policy writings, reports, things like that for more long-term, or, like a summer project or something.
Right.
But we don't have sort of the lunchbox things, or we don't do those kind of services.
Wow. This is so as a sign off, what is something that you would say to a young queer person grappling with the idea of faith and the divine? And then also, what is something you would say to a person of faith who is grappling with appreciating other faiths, other practices of faith, specifically to Christians and Jews, both of the more conservative varieties?
Easy. So for the LGBT struggling with faith, regardless of what religion you are, or non-religious or atheist, doesn't matter. There is something called ensoulment, and that is when God blows the spirit into the fetus, where then it becomes the human spirit. Prior to that, we're biology. We're just, cells dividing,
Hmm.
But there is a point, like about 86 days into the pregnancy, where everyone is, God blows the spirit into the fetus, and therefore everyone is equal, period, regardless of religion, regardless of sexuality, belief or non-belief, period. So whether you're a gay person struggling with faith or non-faith, or whether you're a faith person struggling with religion and the egalitarianism of religion, hello, get it straight. We're all the same. We're all
Yeah.
coming from the same God, period.
Hmm. God, that you say it's easy, but but look at our world and how we're just fucking it up on the daily.
Yeah. It's because that's not what we're taught.
Yep.
It's we were taught to think in tribal ways, and we're
Yep.
taught to
By tribal leaders, and
yeah.
a tribal leader could be someone that's elected into our Congress. I mean, these people that are keeping us under their hand by telling us to believe certain ways. And I'm so thankful that you were encouraging people to question, to think for themselves, to look at the text, to have their own relationship with God or the divine.
Yeah. Critical thinking. Look, we are the mammal with a critical thinking capacity. And in the Quran, it even says this many times. I gave you a brain, use it.
That's the perfect way to end this. I gave you a brain, use it. Wow. Ani, thank you. You guys can't see my face, but I'm just elated at how much more educated I feel right now. And I have so many things I can talk about at parties now. So get ready. But I'm just so thankful you got to spend an hour and a little bit with me. Thank you for giving us your information for the website. Where can we find you on social media, and also your music, any blogs or books you've written as well?
That would be Annie Zonneveld. I have a website, anniezonneveld.com. I'm on Twitter. I'm not very active, but I am very active on Facebook, Annie Zonneveld.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to seeing all the work that you're going to continue to do. I feel so fortunate that I get to know about the work and hopefully spread the message of your work so that people can then also support your work and your efforts, because it is a world lead matter that we're dealing with here and with what you're doing. So thank you again so much. And I look forward to having you back some other time when I know more about Islam and we can ask even more detailed and nuanced questions.
Thank you so much. And thank you to your audience as well. And thanks for having me. I appreciate that.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Bye.
The Fagnostic Podcast is a Matt Hayes production, hosted by, you guessed it, Matt Hayes. You can find me at matthayes.com. That's MATHAYES.com, or on all the socials at Hayes on it. HAYES on it. Music by Michael Spicer. The Fagnostic Podcast is proud to be supported by the Del Shore Studio. Whether you're acting from a pulpit or a proscenium, whether you're writing for a Bible study or a scene study, the Del Shore Studio is an online school offering classes and workshops encouraging all artists to scratch deeper. Visit thedelshorestudio.com for more information.